I'm Julie Zenner along with Dennis Anderson, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
It's been a long road, but a court ruling this week may mark the final chapter in a dispute over Fond du Luth Casino with the City of Duluth. The Fond du Lac Tribal Chair is here to talk about what's next for the casino.
Just as some iron miners prepare to go back to work, more layoffs are announced at another range mine. Is a rebound coming anytime soon?
And in our news file story from 25 years ago, landmark legislation is signed into law.
These stories and more coming up next on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thanks for watching. Denny, it's hard to believe, but it's the last day of July already.
Summer moves quickly in the Northland, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Third to go.
One third to go. That's
And
right.
we've got some good topics tonight, so
All
let's
right,
get started.
absolutely. Thank you very much, Julie. Well, after 6 years of litigation, a federal court ruling this week could mark the end of a legal battle over proceeds from the Fond du Luth Casino. The U.S. District Judge ruled that the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa does not owe the City of Duluth more than $10 million in back payments from the casino. Now, barring an appeal by the city, the judge's ruling ends a revenue sharing agreement between the tribal casino and the city. Here to talk about what's next for the casino is Karen Diver, chair of the Fond du Lac Band of Chippewa. Chair Diver, thank you very much for being here tonight. Are there any other legal questions that between the band and the city, or does this kind of wrap things up?
There is a related case that the band's not a part of that's pending in the DC Circuit Court. The judge out there ruled that the National Indian Gaming Association, or Commission rather, acted properly when it issued the notice of violation and made its ruling that the revenue sharing agreement was no longer legal under the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. So that's a lawsuit against the city, against the National Indian Gaming Commission. The city has appealed that.
Okay.
While we're an interested party and interested in the outcome, we're not actually a litigant.
On the issue of the $10 million the city has alleged was owed by the casino, are you convinced now that maybe the City of Duluth will say, okay, we've discovered that this is the end, or are you not quite sure?
Oh, I don't try to guess that anymore.
Okay.
We've actually thought that there was multiple times when maybe that the realization might have kind of struck some of the leadership that maybe it was time to give it up.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just have to wait and see what they do. Ironically, though, the appellate court it would go to has already ruled twice and sent it back to the district court. So it would seem something of a folly, but
you never know.
Remains to be seen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, even though legally the band is not required to repay the city, could there be a scenario where the band would choose to give some of that money to the city or offer it in payment for city services?
Oh, there's two things I'd like to say about that. One is, let's not forget that the band has paid the City of Duluth $80 million to date. And if we were to pay a payment for services or something that would approximate what other businesses would pay, it would be about $50,000 a year. At that rate, we are prepaid for 1,600 years. So I would think that that would be adequate. But despite all of that, the band has really regretted all of this acrimony. What we wanted was a legal set of agreements, and we have said all along that we are ready to pay for services and are willing to do that. And that offer has been made to the city. And we actually, during mediation talks, talked about, what are some things that perhaps the band and the city can talk about, understanding that that $10 million was sitting there in the bank. But the law says that the band has to receive something of actual value for it. The city really wasn't interested in that. They wanted the revenue sharing agreement to continue, which is clearly now by a dozen or so courts have been found to be not compliant with the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. So I believe that the band is still willing to pay for services, despite the fact that we probably are good for about 1,500 and some years. Because we do want to be a good neighbor. We do want to be a good employer in the city of Duluth. All of those things we're doing on our own without being offered tax incentives like you're doing for other businesses. We're willing to do that. I'll also say that the rhetoric out of the city makes it difficult for the tribal council to continue having a real positive feeling about repairing the relationship. Blaming the roads on the band is not appropriate because the money was never tied to roads. And if you were on notice prior to 2009 that the deal might change, wouldn't you want to come up with a plan B? And then also saying that the regulatory agency acted inappropriately and politically. Well, you have a DC Circuit District Court that just said they acted properly. So that rhetoric does make it difficult, but are we willing to pay for services? Absolutely, and we've been steadfast in that since the beginning.
Karen, you actually brought up my next question. And I can't speak for the city, but can the band effectively lay aside any harsh feelings that might exist between the two sides?
You know what, it really can, but unfortunately, even though we've said, can we tone down the rhetoric? We don't think it's fruitful for your citizens, our citizens, or the relationship. It's kind of continued. And so that does make it difficult. I think our best hopes are really looking towards the next administration.
Now, Mayor Ness points to Massachusetts, for example, as another place around the country where a similar agreement between what the band and the city had seems to be working without challenge. What's different here?
What's different is that's speculative. That project is not started. It hasn't been approved by the National Indian Gaming Commission as appropriate, and it's a destination resort. It's a massively large complex in an undeveloped area where you're running all new infrastructure, building capacity of municipal services, sewer, water lines, electricity, policing, fire department capacity. These are huge, huge complexes. We're talking about one little building in a block in downtown Duluth that was existing before we got there. One would think that the city had capacity before that building was redeveloped.
So, Karen,
so they're not apples and oranges. And it hasn't been approved.
You bring up another good point. What's the future for the casino here in Duluth? What are your plans for the casino?
It's kind of sad to say, but we've not really wanted to dream too much because while all of this was going on and everything was really so uncertain, we knew we wanted to be a good neighbor. We knew the building was 15 years past needing a rehab, and we regretted that. But with all of our money kind of tied up in litigation, and remember, the sole cost of renovation would have came at the band's expense, with the city not sharing in any of that cost, even though they would have shared in the revenue. So we are doing the $6 million rehab of the building now. The floor that's done on the second floor is beautiful. We'll have a no smoking floor on the first floor. And of course we have the Carter Hotel property, which was kind of a blight on the community. Those issues the litigation is over, but it's not into trust yet. Perhaps some administrative offices there, or we can certainly talk to future administrations about what their plan is for Old Downtown and see if we can't do something complementary there.
Now you mentioned that it's not into trust yet, and some people might not understand how that all works, how the band is able to get property put in trust in the middle of a city like Duluth. Can you kind of give a little bit of a primer on that so that people can understand?
So this area was original homeland to the Fond du Luth Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. We weren't near Cloquet. We were at the head of the lakes. And because of that, back in the early 80s, when this deal was first kind of being worked out, in order to have gaming and have a tribe run it, they had to have the land be federal Indian land, because that is what made it not subject to state gaming laws and under the jurisdiction and control of the tribe to operate a gaming enterprise. So, some of the other rhetoric around it is the city allowed the band to have gaming there. Well, we don't need their permission. But what they did do is they didn't object. We saw that a couple years ago with one of the counties saying, we don't want the band to take more land into trust. The federal government doesn't try to stand in the way of tribes regaining their homeland. In a municipality off reservation, it was a little unusual. It had been done before. So in order for the band's regulations to apply on that parcel, it would actually be owned by the federal government, and held on behalf of the Fond du Luth Band, but then our regulatory authority would apply there.
Do you think that the public dispute that the band has had with the city, has it tarnished the band's image at all? Has it impacted revenues at the casino at all?
I don't think we've really seen that. You know, we really have a loyal customer base. The recession hurt far more than I think all of this does. I think it's a complicated matter, and do I think that perhaps some people might have been influenced by some of the negative rhetoric? Well, yeah, because it is difficult to understand, and you want to believe your city leaders and what's being put forth there. But, you know, I've come on this show before and tried to make people understand kind of the complexities of it. And some people have bias in their hearts, and they look for the things that reinforce it, and some people look for facts, and some people don't care.
So Karen, how does the band impact the region?
We did an economic impact study about 2 years ago, and we have well over a $300 million economic impact annually, $80 million in payroll, direct payroll, and then with the spin-off, they use a multiplier effect of about 1.7 for every dollar we spend. So, you know, we're a large employer. We're maintaining our employment at about 2,100 employees right now. So that makes us the second largest after the essential health system. So we continue to play a vital role here, and we're interested in continuing to play a vital role in Duluth. We're doing a major expansion of our healthcare facility on 4th Street. $12 million. So that's going to be breaking ground here within the next week and a half.
Sounds like you're busy. All right.
Very busy.
Karen Diver from the chair of the Fond du Luth Band. Thank you, Karen, for being here again.
Thank you both.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, let's dig into our news file archive for a look at what was making news 25 years ago this week.
Close to 2,000 people were on hand today at the White House as President George Bush made it official. The Americans with Disabilities Act is now law. Some local residents were on hand to witness the signing.
Number one, I think it's going to change my life in the sense that it's going to allow me, as a person with a disability, to be treated equally to other people. The main thrust, I think, of the whole bill is it's going to place the emphasis on my ability, not my disability.
Minnesota already has laws addressing some forms of discrimination against people with disabilities, but according to advocates for the disabled here in the Northland, more needs to be done, and it will take time for the new law to really take hold.
Locally, it's not like we're going to see results immediately, but down the road, as new buildings are constructed, as new buses are purchased, these are the types of things that are going to be accessible that in the past haven't been accessible. So there's definitely going to be an impact there, but it's going to be over time.
Currently, legislation is being drafted to cover the financial side of the bill. Many advocates here say they expect to see no problems in that bill passing. For Late Edition, Joe Thornton, KDLH News.
Just as it looked like the worst might be over for Iron Range Mines, there was news this week that United Taconite will be laying off more than 400 workers. Cliffs Natural Resources, which owns United, said a surplus of taconite pellets and low demand is forcing the shutdown. But the company's CEO pointed to better days ahead, saying the cycle has reached its bottom. Meanwhile, U.S. Steel is planning to bring back laid-off miners at its Mintac plant as it prepares to restart in August. With those mixed messages, we welcome Tony Barrett, Professor of Economics at the College of St. Scholastica, and Don Fosnacht is the director for the Center for Applied Research at the Natural Resources Research Institute. And welcome back. We had you here in May talking about the same topic, and now we want to move it forward a little bit. Tony, do you agree that the market has reached the bottom and that brighter days might be ahead?
Well, I would say to anyone watching this show, pay more attention to people in the industry than me. It certainly is, there's no indication it'll get worse. But on the other hand, I have no great evidence it's going to get a whole lot better real soon.
So, go ahead.
Oh, Don, what, if anything, have you observed in the industry since the last time you were here that may be surprising to you?
Well, I think people are probably pretty shocked that all of a sudden in 2014 we're almost booming, and all of a sudden it's like someone emptied the glass.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably the most striking thing. I think the other things that are going on is this direct linkage between what happened in oil country and what happened to the steel industry. There's quite a linkage between iron ore prices and the price of oil.
Yeah,
for example.
explain that a little bit.
Well, they're both general commodities, and we in the steel industry, we supply a lot of the goods that go into oil country, two-wheeler goods, and the drilling operations and things of that nature. So when the price of oil went down, they stopped drilling. Well, they don't need the steel.
Right.
So that shut down, for example, Granite City Works, which was directly supplied by Keytac. So they're not taking the pellets into the blast furnace for that steel works down there. So they had to stop, and they did that when they had an excess of taconite pellets available.
Yeah. So what's the impact going to have at United Taconite in Evelyn? This sounds like it's going to be for at least a month. We're not really talking an end date yet, are we?
Nope.
No, there's no end date, but I think there are other things that'll probably be going on at United Taconite, because they also have a property in Michigan that is nearing the end of its useful life. I think that's the Empire Mine that supplies my old steelworks, actually, with pellets that go into our big blast furnace we had down there. I think they're going to look at maybe having some of that shift over to United Taconite long term, but it's a flux pellet, and that means they have to do some things to make it there.
On the other side of the coin, Mintac is talking about...
Yeah, there are some silver linings in the news of last week. One, Mintac bringing its workers back. Two, the fact that United is going to take advantage of this layoff, if you call it taking advantage, to refit their plant, to develop a new product. You also heard Cliffs announcing that they're going to do North Shore and modernize that into making a direct reduction pellet. All that's, in the long run, is good. In the short run, we still have about 1,000 workers laid off up on the Iron Range, and that's hurting the local economy.
Talk about how big a blow that is to the local economy,
Oh,
both in terms of the people and the communities, and then as it spreads out a bit.
You know, you just can't minimize the impact on the relatively small communities when you lose, 100 employees in your small town who are making $60,000 to $80,000 a year. All of a sudden, they're on unemployment insurance. It's going to affect everything. And then as you get further away, the effect gets smaller, but you're still going to notice it. Even say at the mall, there are going to be fewer people coming down from the range shopping on the weekend. You just can't minimize the impact. You just try and hope right now it's two mines. It's United and it's Keewatin plant, magnetation. You hope it doesn't get worse. It's not as bad as it has been, but you can't minimize it for the communities directly affected.
None of us have a crystal ball, but where do you two see the mining industry here in Minnesota 25 years from now?
Oh, I'm optimistic in that way, especially if these investments for more higher value products are done. We will always need to make steel in the United States. As long as there's steel being made in the United States, we will need Iron Range taconite. Our taconite producers are not competing with the Australians. Our steel producers are, they're competing with the Chinese and stuff. But as long as there's steel being made in the United States, there'll be demand for our iron ore.
You need a certain amount of what we call virgin iron material to put in there to make the metallurgical properties of the steel that's made in the country, and we're the source of that. So it will have to change in form. You have to take the oxygen out that right now is in there and make it more of a metallic product. But I think U.S. Steel, I read their 10K that just came out, I think in about March. And even their chairman is saying that they're ready to make DR grade type of iron ore and get it produced into a metallized product. So they're thinking about it. We don't know all the plans that are going on with the upper management there, but they're obviously between Cliffs and U.S. Steel, they're thinking about what to do in the future.
The last 30 years shows us how that industry can adapt and evolve. It's amazing how productive it's become, how efficient it's become, And there's been gradual technological change over those years, and that's exactly what I'd expect for the next 25 years.
Do you feel that the industry in our region has been nimble enough to respond to these changing market conditions?
Well, I think there's a lot of pressure to keep the costs low, and I think that's where they really concentrated to begin with. But even with our organization, we've worked a lot with some of the mines on trying to improve the flow sheets that they use or the processing they use. And I think that they're very supportive of trying to look at the future. And we're working and focusing on what kinds of changes are needed at an individual plant to take out, for example, more of the gang material, which is the silica and some of the other non-metallic type materials that are in there, so that they're ready to do a DRI type plant in the future on one of their lines. We're working with them.
The U.S. International Trade Commission has agreed that foreign steel was dumped in the United States.
Yes.
How significant was that statement? In other words, does that commission have any teeth?
Yeah, it's just slow.
Very, very
it's
slow.
slow, and that's the problem. I think it's more, we're also seeing that the Chinese government is telling their steel companies to cut back on their exporting, which is the source of most of the dump steel. That sort of pressure is actually probably more effective than the legal process, because the legal process is so slow. And that's why I think there is reason to think that this is the bottom of the cycle. Because this cycle is not really economic. It's caused by imports, caused by other countries' slow economic growth where they're not consuming the steel they're making. And so there's every reason to believe this is the bottom. And hopefully in the next 6 months we'll see even reduced amounts of imports, and that helps us.
Is foreign steel being dumped in other countries where other countries are going through what we are here?
The Europeans are facing similar type issues, and in fact, I think they're going after anti-dumping type rulings in the European Union as well. And if you look at what happens, we're importing between what I would call indirect steel imports, which is manufactured goods that are now made elsewhere and brought in and they contain steel, and direct steel imports. Roughly a third of all the steel we use is imported.
Don, the last time, go ahead.
No, I was going to say one difference is that we're the world's largest economy and we're growing. Europe isn't growing very fast.
Right.
We are sort of the market of last resort for world steel.
In some ways, you kind of changed the course of my question. But the economy is growing. In some ways, is it beneficial to the broader U.S. economy if the price of steel is down?
Oh, that's a good political question. If you're a consumer of steel, dumped steel's wonderful. If the Chinese want to subsidize their steel manufacturers, that's great for a consumer of steel. It's bad for our steel industry.
Don, last time you were here, we talked about some of the structural changes in the industry that make this maybe a little bit different from the cycles that we've seen in the past.
Right.
And we can't assume everybody saw that conversation, but it was really interesting. Talk about that a little bit.
Over the last 10 years, I think we're up to about the loss of 10 blast furnaces, for example. And every time you lose a blast furnace, obviously you're losing market share for iron ore because you're not going to consume it. And I think we're up to about 20 million tons or better of displaced iron ore market share just because of the close down of those blast furnaces. So some of the electric arc furnace companies, including Steel Dynamics and Nucor, are trying to get some of the metallic iron through an iron ore form that they convert in the DRI process themselves. So we saw that with Mesabi Nugget up here. That was shipped back to Indiana and they used their plants there. Nucor has put in a plant down in Louisiana outside New Orleans. And now I think a large steel company in Europe actually put a plant near, I think, Corpus Christi, Texas, to make DRI and ship it all the way back to Austria. So we're seeing this dynamic, but the key there is you need very pure iron to make the quality of steel you need in the future. So that's the thing that we have to build on. We have all this iron ore up here. It's high quality by the time we make it into pellets. We can convert it into a very high quality metallic product.
Still a lot of product is stockpiled, isn't it?
That's true too.
But what kind of an impact do you think all of this is going to have on contract negotiations? Will the steel workers be forced to make some concessions in the interest of long-term jobs?
I always hold my breath when the contracts are being negotiated. From the workers' point of view, you don't want to negotiate a contract at the bottom of a cycle, and that's kind of what's happening. I would like to think that management realizes that asking for a lot of concessions is not in their long-term best interest. From what I hear, the negotiations are moving along, and hopefully they'll have a peaceful resolution. We haven't had a strike for a long time, and it'd be
Been a
nice
while,
if we
yeah.
can avoid it for a few more years.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much for coming in and sharing your insights on this.
Always fun.
It's
All
good.
right.
welcome.
Tony, Don,
Thank
thank you both.
Okay.
Let's turn now to the week's business news from the folks at Business North. With the news that United Taconite will be temporarily idled because market demand for taconite pellets has declined, comes a silver lining, according to the company. Lorenco Gonzalez, president of Cliffs Natural Resources, predicted conditions should improve during the second half of the year. Gonzalez also revealed some positive news, saying the company is negotiating an agreement to sell direct reduced iron pellets to international steelmaker Nucor.
Dennis Kempton, former editor of the Reader Weekly in Duluth, has launched a new digital publication called Zenith City Style. The web-based site focuses on urban city life, tastemakers, artists, young professionals, and their families. Kempton said the publication is needed because Duluth is in a period of extraordinary transition and renaissance. The style, fashion, food, and culture of Duluth are attributes that people moving here and visiting here want to know about, he added. Zenith City Style will also highlight the professional and personal lives of various chefs, bartenders, bands, and entrepreneurs.
Odyssey Resorts has acquired Breezy Point Resort on Lake Superior near Two Harbors. The 12-cabin property is situated off Scenic Highway 61 near Larsmont Cottages, also owned by Odyssey Resorts. This fall, the company will launch the first phase of renovations, including updated floor plans and new interior designs, as well as exterior updates. With the acquisition, Odyssey Resorts now owns 7 properties. For more on these and other stories, visit businessnorth.com.
Call now if you have a comment on the show. Dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message, or send an email to almanacnorth@wdse.org. And browse the WDSE website for updates on your favorite PBS programs, find out about events at the station, or check out our broadcast schedule. And Denny, I was thinking as I was reading that story about Zenith City Style that a couple of cultural dinosaurs like us probably won't be featured.
That could very well be. All right.
For Denny and the crew here at Almanac North, I'm Julie Zenner. Have a great weekend.